Given, and it's also
Today, it's never been
putting the squeeze. They make money on
excessive materialism and militarism. We know full well that racism is still that hound of hell.
Amazing. I am a Gryffindor, and people seem to hate Gryffindors now. That's the new thing I've heard.
It's just
The basic bitch house.
Yes, exactly.
there's that. I think
John, what house are you in?
I don't know.
I think you're a Hufflepuff. You're
I don't know. I don't know what that means. I mean, I know Gryffindor is the one that Harry was in, and
Yeah.
Slytherin was the one that all the bad people were in.
No, Slytherin's okay.
Oh, Slytherin's okay?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
all the bad people were in Slytherin, but like there are good people in Slytherin.
It's weird because she,
I
in
think
real
you're
Joe in
Hufflepuff.
real life, like has nuance about what she thinks about each house, and it's like, no, not all Slytherins are bad, but then literally all the Slytherins in the book, except for like 1.5, are bad.
Yeah, I don't even remember who the good ones
So
were.
it was like, girl, don't insist that like
Yeah.
that people are misunderstanding the house when you'd have to read extra stuff and read her commentary to really understand how nuanced each house can be.
Yeah.
And so I think the fans are just reclaiming
Yes.
each of the other 3 houses that don't get any respect or attention. So people
Yeah.
are reclaiming Slytherin of like, I'm not evil, I'm just ambitious and cool and smart and cunning and like whatever that means to them. Hufflepuffs are like, okay, you could make us the House of Miscellaneous, but also we're just pretty chill people who like friendship
Yeah.
and loyalty and food.
yes.
And
exactly.
the Ravenclaws are,
Smart.
this mixture of like the smart kids, but also the artsy ones. I think if you're like,
artsy?
yeah, I feel like in the
Oh.
Luna way, or like people who are creative and like think
Mm-hmm.
outside of the box a lot. I think those are the.
Sorry.
It's
Just a little bit closer to your face.
cool. I'm just like, do not move.
No, you're fine. You can move around as much as you want.
Cool.
Yeah.
Just don't move the mic,
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because then it'll just end up farther and farther away.
Yeah, I feel like Hufflepuff is coming in. I feel like, John, you're a
I
Hufflepuff.
think I'm a Hufflepuff?
I think
yeah?
you're a Hufflepuff.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Unless you want to be something. I don't know. You have to take the
I
quiz
think.
on Pottermore.
Well, no.
No, not the quiz?
No,
Where
I
do
hate
we-
the quiz because it missorts people, and then they have like
Oh.
identity crises, and I'm like, well, if you feel like it's sorted you into Gryffindor and it's wrong,
Yeah.
then it's wrong. Like I think it should be whatever you feel. I think it's like when you eeny meeny miny mo something, and you're like, all right, I picked this one, and then you have that feeling of like, ugh.
Like,
then it's the
yes.
other one. So if you take the sorting quiz, sure. But if
Yeah.
it sorts you into Ravenclaw and you're like, that doesn't feel right, then maybe you're not in Ravenclaw.
Yeah.
Because that's the part of the point is that it takes your choice into consideration. So,
Yeah. It's kind of like when you get a wand. We're talking about this as if it's real life, but
oh, I
it
do
is.
that all the
Yeah.
time. Don't worry about it.
I definitely waited for my letter. I was like, when is this letter coming? I need to go to
know.
Hogwarts.
I know.
What did you think about the new movies?
I don't watch them.
Oh, okay.
Just makes me mad. They
Yeah,
just
it was
lots of things.
confusing.
They're confusing. The Johnny Depp of it all. And I think even without that, I didn't need it. I didn't need this version of whatever this is. They were like, let's do a Fantastic Beasts movie. And I'm like, okay, we could have a diverse Newt Scamander. That would have been great. And the more that I think about it, the more I'm mad that this, when you have something like Fantastic Beasts, it could have been like a romp in the jungle, like Indiana Jones, but like with magical creatures and like maybe searching for treasure or searching for a beast. It could have been just like this fun adventure story in the way of like Indiana Jones or The Mummy that are based on these like old time adventure stories. And I'm just upset that it's not. Like the more I think about that, that's what it could have been. I'm like, wow, it could just be that, and now it's not.
Yeah.
But and then there's the I didn't need Dumbledore's backstory in this way, especially like let's have the big love story between Grindelwald and Dumbledore and then literally not show it. Like the whole point is that they were in love and he had to fight him or whatever. I don't know.
Sort
It's
of
just
showed
like
it in like a very like symbolic where like the kids would be okay seeing it. They
Right.
like touch their wands.
Okay. And it's so there's that. And then it just keeps getting worse and worse. So there's the what my friends Robin and Bayana called the Serafina rant, the Serafina Pickery rant, because Serafina, do you not even remember who this character is?
I don't remember.
That's part of exactly. She is the president of Makusa in the first movie, and she's a black woman president in 1920s America.
Interesting.
How? I appreciate to some degree the colorblind casting that clearly went into that, but then if you colorblind cast a diverse actor for a role, you then have to make sure that the backstory makes sense still. Like you because it was clearly written for clearly written for white people, like for a white actress.
Yeah.
Probably a woman. Like probably they're like, ooh, we'll make it a woman. And then they're like, ooh, what if we cast like what if we cast someone who's not white? And they thought that they were doing something. But in 1920s, white women just got the right to vote in America, in Muggle America. Yeah. And you can't really divorce Muggle culture and wizard culture because there's so many Muggle-borns in wizard culture. So it's like, you really want me to believe that the Muggle-borns and also the racist, blood purist wizards were like, yes, let's elect this black woman to be president in 1920s America, when white women just got to the right to vote, and Serafina's black women peers still cannot. It just doesn't make sense for me. Her parents or like her grandparents would have been slaves, and like
even in the wizarding world.
Yeah.
I'm so naive. I'm just like, I'm sure the wizarding world is just super progressive.
Well, that's what Joe wants us to think.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't track when you actually try to look at what that is.
Yeah,
like,
I do feel like she backpedals a lot. Like,
yes.
For example, when the casting for Hermione. A black Hermione. Which, it's fine. But then, like, a lot of people were angry, and she was just like, I never said she wasn't black.
And it was like, you didn't.
And I was like, but all the movies.
So we're claiming her as such because you didn't. So, like, we've already decided this before you gave your stamp of approval. We're like, oh, Hermione could be black. Let's just make her black. And she was just like, I approve. And it's like, well, first of all, we didn't need your approval to do this. But also, you literally had them cast a white Hermione in the movies, and also all of the artwork that was ever produced, all your doodles, all the artwork that was produced is all white Hermione. So it's like, you didn't you just approve of this now. This is not something you had in mind. So it's just like all of the diversity that she's come up with since has just always been like, Dumbledore was totally gay.
Yeah, exactly. It feels very performative.
Yeah, it's like you didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't. There's no text of that in the books. There's no text of Hermione. Right. There's no text of Hermione being anything but white in the books. Just because we know that you're writing from a white default. Every single character who is black, she explicitly stated that they were black.
That is so true. I didn't even think about that.
And not in the good way.
And also one Asian, Cho Chang, who I identified with.
Of course, but of course, it's
like
you're gonna go for the character that like is most like you in one way or another. And for a lot of people of color, that is, oh look, there's a black character, and it's like, they're not anything like me, but I'm going to root for them because they're the black character. So obviously, like, a lot of Asian Harry Potter fans are like, yes, Cho Chang. And, like, South Asians are like, the Patils. And so I understand, like, she has sprinkles, but she doesn't do anything with those sprinkles. They're just there. Yeah. Cho Chang doesn't really have much to do. Isn't her name, like...
Her name's not even real.
Right, like, it doesn't make sense for an Asian character. Like... So, I don't know. Yeah. It's really difficult to love this series when you're a person of color because, like, the writing's great and, like, fun and, like, the story's good. But then you're like, oh, there are literally 5 explicitly black characters in the series.
Yeah.
I could put them, we literally put them on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
I literally have a t-shirt with just all 5. Plus, we've obviously adopted Hermione. And Lavender, who was in the movie cast as black. Well, she was a black like extra in the first 2 movies.
Oh, wow.
2 different black extras. So they have a character who's in Gryffindor House in the first Brown, 2 movies, right? And I think in the credits she might. I don't think in the film she's. identified as Lavender, but like I think she's hanging out with the Gryffindor characters in Harry's year and in Harry's classes, and I think maybe in the credits she might be identified as Lavender, but once she had speaking lines, they cast whatever her name is, a white actress, and I was like, you could have just kept her as black.
Yeah,
it didn't even have to be those two actresses, because it was, if it were just the same one, I still would be mad, but it would be different than the fact that they literally cast two different ones as the Lavender Brown character, and then when she had lines and like a part, they whitewashed her. So we've claimed her as black also.
Fucked. I had no idea. You are like deep in Harry Potter. Like,
definitely,
the deepest I got was being a hardcore shipper. Like back in my middle school days.
Sure,
where
yeah.
I was like, it should have been. I was a huge Harry, Hermione, and Draco Ginny shipper. I was to like an insane level. Like when Ron and Hermione got together, I was like furious. I was like, J.K. Rowling does not know what true romance is. And when J.K. Rowling came out and said, yeah, it should have been Harry and Hermione, with that one interview.
Yeah, that interview got weird.
Screamed. I was just like, what? It should have been. And it should have been Draco and Ginny. It could have like solved the Malfoy Weasley. That was where I was going.
Gotcha.
Like a huge fan fiction nerd as well.
Yeah. I, for the most part, read a lot of just the canon ships in Harry Potter, but so I'm friends. I don't know if we're actually recording now.
We are. We've been recording.
Great. I had a feeling, but so I wanted to make sure I say it in the right way.
Welcome to Now in Color, the podcast that brings those who have been erased from history back to the forefront. I'm your host, Sandie Chang, and today I'm joined by Constance Gibbs.
Hey. Yes. Thanks for having me. My pals over at Wizard Team, it's a Harry Potter podcast. They're two black women who host this podcast. And I started listening like super early on. Now we're really good friends. But they reread the books chapter by chapter and you know, focus on the series in general, but also from their black perspective and stuff. And the more they read the books and they're like, they were like, I'm fine with Ron, and I personally was too, and I think I still am, but he just has, when you're reading it really closely, you're just like, wow, Ron is tripping. Like, what are you doing? And so there's just been a lot of like, Ron who?
I hate Ron.
in terms of like who you want to ship them with. And so it's been really fun. So we, you know, I'm part of their website now, and so I help them with like writing and stuff. So during February each year, we do a thing called Black Wizard History Month. So we focus on the black characters of the series and like allow black fans to, you know, talk about Harry Potter from their lens and like add a little bit of blackness to the series and like focus on those characters. It's part of a larger project called Hogwarts BSU. So again, focusing on the black characters of the series. And so I've written some stories about, you know, Dean Thomas and Lee Jordan and Blaise Zabini, who is like my new, I don't know, I guess favorite character, but in the sense of like you can kind of do whatever you want with him because he gets so little book page time. But one of our friends who's written for Black Wizard, started up this story for Black Wizard History Month, has written a mashup of Harry Potter and To All the Boys I've Loved Before. I just saw your heart, like you clutched your pearls, like yes. So it is Black Hermione and Dean. And so Dean is the, you know, like, let's fake date because it's during 6th year. And, you know, Hermione's like mad about Ron because he's dating Lavender and being really a big jerk to her. And Dean and Ginny break up a little bit earlier than they do in the books. And then it's like, let's fake date until to like make them jealous. But actually, they're just going to fall in love at the end. So
I'm going to read this.
I will send it to you.
Please send this to me. So
in terms of like fanfic, it's like I, for the most part, was a pretty canon shipper, and I noticed that a lot of the fic I was reading were all the white characters, but it's fun to kind of reorient my thinking and like think about what the Black characters were doing, and to both read it and write it in a way that like includes us in the narrative, because there aren't enough characters, and then you just start making some up, you know. And
maybe
like
I should
include
go
them
back and read some Cho Chang fan fiction or something.
Oh, it's there. I mean, one of the rules of the internet is that there is fic of it. There is fan fiction of it at some point somewhere.
Exactly. This is the best way to introduce you now. So our whole Harry Potter talk is amazing, and I'm joined today by Constance. Which one do you prefer? Connie or Constance?
You can do Constance Gibbs, but like on an interpersonal level, we can be Connie.
Constance Gibbs is a writer, editor, podcaster, epic tweeter, and TV junkie living in NYC. She is currently a writer for a children's magazine and a writer-editor at Black Girls Create. Before, she was a features writer for the New York Daily News and the TV editor for Black Girl Nerds. Her other writing has been featured in She Knows, Polygon, Shondaland, IndieWire, The Mary Sue, Hello Giggles, The Nerds of Color, Just About Right, and Bitch Flicks, among others. Welcome, Constance Gibbs.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for
after
coming.
we've already just talked about magic and blackness, which is a great segue later for my topic.
But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the podcast you're on. If you want to, I mean, you talked about one of them already. But the other.
So my friends Robin and Bayana, who run the Wizard Team podcast, which is a Harry Potter podcast that I am occasionally on. I'm on enough. But with them, we also have a Doctor Who podcast called TARBIS, which stands for Time and Relative Blackness in Space, which, as we were discussing with the Hogwarts BSU thing, sort of just watching Doctor Who from a Black person's perspective and kind of focusing on the Black characters that are on that show, which again are few and far between, and the writing of them is not always great.
Yeah. There's Mickey. I remember Mickey.
There's Mickey and Martha, which, you know, Martha's great, but her writing is like, and that's the thing with a lot of the Black characters, is that the characters are great, but then the writers have them do things when you're like, why would you put them through all of that? You know, poor Martha.
And why did Martha and Mickey end up together?
Exactly.
They're like,
that's the thing that I'm of two minds of it, because I'm like, this is the laziest pairing you could come up. Let's just stick the two Black people together. It's very pair the spares. But also I'm like, I mean, I'm not mad. I guess I can't really be mad at it because they both went through the same thing. So it's like, who else could understand, true. The Doctor being in love with, like, both of them suffer from the Doctor having been in love with Rose.
Wow.
And then let's just, traveling through time, and who else would understand how to fight aliens, you know? So I'm of two minds where I'm like, I don't like it, but also I can't really be mad at it.
Yeah.
So Martha and Mickey, I feel like I should know them better, but I need to make a shirt. I'm trying to make a shirt where it's just put them all on the same shirt. There's Bill from season 10, who's, again, her character's great, curious, loves asking questions, queer, has actually a similar backstory in terms of like her mom died when she was little, my mom died when she was little, when I was little, and like we look enough alike, like this light skinned fro wearing character, but her ending was terrible. Stephen Moffat just,
I don't think he knows how to write women.
No.
Or just anyone that's not like a white man.
Yeah.
I don't think he knows how to write
that's
them.
exactly the problem.
Yeah.
So Bill was great. Her writing was not great. Danny was not great, and his writing was not great.
Danny, I completely
You forget about Danny
him.
Because he makes me angry, honestly. I was rewatching his season last summer, I want to say, and I had to stop because he met the Doctor, and it was just like the tension between them was just so unnecessary and so aggressive that I was like, why is this happening? It was just really like, he's dating Clara, and she lies to him about still traveling through space and time, but also they never really developed their relationship where I was okay with him being mad about it. So, like, we see them go on a date once, and then there's a montage. And then all of a sudden, she's like, but I still want to do the thing that I enjoy doing. And he's just like, no,
Yeah,
and it was just like, but I just met you.
Yeah.
And I know that there was a montage of them having a longer relationship, but we just met you as a character, and you're just going to be really aggressive about Clara traveling through space and time. Like, we're watching the show because we love the characters traveling through space and time, and you're going to be mad at it. So that's one part that makes me mad. And then the way that the Doctor talks about Danny makes me upset in a way that, like, is on the line of, like, this is kind of racist. And, like, I don't want to attribute the Doctor to being that, especially towards Danny, but... And I understand that it doesn't come from that space, but Danny being a former soldier, and he's at this school where the Doctor meets him, and he's a math teacher, and the fact that the Doctor is like, he can't be the math teacher, he must be the PE teacher, rubs me the wrong way every time it comes out of his mouth. Because he says it more than once. It's just like, he's not the math. He's got to be this dumb jock because he was a soldier. But clearly, when you're looking at it from the lens of race... No,
wow.
it doesn't read the same way as when you're just trying to, if this were a white character, it wouldn't be the same. Like, it would be like, oh, he's a soldier, like Doctor being like, he's a soldier. He must be the PE teacher, which also is just like rude to soldiers and like people in the military who are like, they have to be smart, and math is involved in a lot of military roles. But so it would read that way if he were a white character, but because he's a black character and the history of like black people not being allowed to, you know, have the appearance of being smart and being intelligent, it sits wrong in my stomach. So and then just their like the way they clash, I just hate it. And so season 8 was really difficult for me, and I didn't like it. And I feel like I'm forgetting one.
Me too. I don't remember
Mickey,
a lot of
Martha,
people of color in
Bill,
that
Danny.
show.
I guess I'm just not thinking about Ryan, but he was the latest one. So
Yeah.
I was just like moving him to last. But Ryan from the latest season is adorable and great. And I know you said you haven't watched this season, but I will say the premiere started off really great, and then it was really interesting to watch all the people on my timeline, both white and non-white, but mostly the black people that I follow on Twitter who watch Doctor Who, because obviously I've built this little community based on the, because of the podcast. But we were all watching this episode, and so they introduced Ryan and his grandmother, and his grandmother's this like really fierce, bold woman, and she's like, let's do this, let's do that, like she's in it with them, with all the new companions and the new Doctor. And then you could see the timeline, my Twitter timeline, like getting more and more nervous because it was like, don't you dare do the thing. Don't do it. Don't do it. And they killed her in the first episode. And it was just like, did you really just fridge a black woman on the show to further, Ryan and his white step grandfather, their relationship was, tense or whatever. And then Grace is like, no, I love you both, whatever. But they clearly didn't like each other, and then clearly the plot was about to be Grace has died, and they both fly on the TARDIS to like reconcile and like become friends in their grief. And I was like, you do know that the trope of fridging is killing a woman character to further the plot of Men. And it was like, maybe they thought it wasn't as bad because it's a woman doctor now, but it just was just a really unfortunate way to start the season. So
I will look
there's
out
also
for
Grace. So Grace and Ryan and Mickey and Martha and Danny and Bill. So
I'm
one day I'll have a shirt with all their names on it.
I'm definitely going to listen to TARBIS when I start watching the new season.
Yeah, we did a few before last season started, I think. Season 10. And then we did some episodes in between season 10 and 11, and then we've done a thing after both season 10, like a post-ep discussion after 10 and after 11. So that's mostly just what I do, is talk about Harry Potter and Doctor Who and like nerd stuff and inclusion.
Growing up, did you always identify as like a nerd?
Yeah,
quote unquote?
Yeah. I was always just like the quiet one who read a lot and didn't talk to a lot of people, and had a very, very small group of friends whenever I did have friends, and like was always the one reading, and finishing the reading challenges that the teachers would give you. Just like, I've read 100 books this year or whatever it was. And I'm like, wow, I wish I could get back to that.
No.
Do not read nearly as much now. But I would like go to the library, you know, living in the city. The library was like 8 blocks away, and I'm like 8 or 9 years old. I live with my grandmother. So she did not have the energy or the time to, you know, be walking me to the library and school all the time. So and it's a city kid thing anyway. Like, you kind of go off on your own earlier than I think most kids in other cities would.
And so you're born and raised in New York City.
Yeah, born and raised here. So, you know, I would like walk to the library and come back with like a stack of like 8 or 9 books.
Oh, gosh, we would have been such good friends.
Of course,
as a kid.
yeah, I bet.
I was the same way.
Just like with my big stack of books, just like walking back, like got my whole, you know, I don't even remember like Holes and the Sideways Stories from Wayside School books. I was a big fan of Sammy Keys, who was like this teen mystery, you know, amateur detective who would like solve crimes, but she was like living with her grandmother, which is one thing I connected to. But she was living with her grandmother illegally in a senior citizen apartment, so she'd have to like sneak in and out of the apartment, and like her nosy neighbor would be like, I'm looking out for you, you know. And I was like, well, good thing that's not me. But I would love that series because I love a mystery. Yeah, so I always considered myself a nerd. And I went to like gifted schools and stuff, so it was extra like, no, you're a nerd because you have homework.
Same. I recently, my mom actually reminded me that whenever we had summer readings, like for school or for like AP English, I would be the only person to complete it. And then my friends would we had this thing where we had to highlight the book and write notes, and then like the teacher would flip through, and that would be proof that you did the reading.
And they would copy your highlights.
And they would copy the highlights and like sort of paraphrase the notes, and I'd like freely give it out. I would not charge people. I didn't even think until I've been watching.
You could have been an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I didn't even think that. My mom got she was just like, you can't have your friends copy off of you. And I was like, why not? And I would like freely read people's essays, and I'd be like, I'll read this for you. I got this. Right. Because I was also like just such a nerd. Like, I think one of my friend's parents called us the nerd herd, like a group of little like bookworms.
Of course. Yeah. I don't know that I had a nerd name, but I just kept going to schools that were increasingly like, we're all nerds here. So it's like, it wasn't, I guess at some point outside of school, I was very much like, yikes, I'm a nerd. But in school, it was sort of like, I mean, I'm a nerd, but also you're a nerd too about some other thing, you know? And I still feel like I don't know if hide is the right word, because I'm not good at pretending that I'm not a nerd. Like, I literally walked in here with this Harry Potter sweater on, and I wear this to work. Like, I am not good at like not pretending that I'm not who I am. But which is why I could never work in like a corporate work environment. But I feel like even in a space where I was nerdy, there were still like nerd things that I didn't really talk about as much. You know, like my love of Harry Potter was very obvious and apparent, especially because I went to high school while it was still coming out. Like it came out, the last one came out when I finished high school. So it was just like, wow, this is like the end of an era twice.
Yeah, it's like you grew up with Harry.
I grew up with it. And like obviously everyone kind of loved Harry Potter, you know, like obviously it was this worldwide phenomenon, so it wasn't like it was this like niche thing that I was into, but I just felt like everyone else wasn't as into it as I was. And so I felt like, I don't know, I was I don't know if hiding is the right word, but I wouldn't talk about it to the depths that I wanted to talk about it all the time, because I felt like it was this like extra nerdy thing that I did. Or like I would read fan fiction and I never talked about the fact that I read fan fiction. And then, you know, as an adult, now that fan fiction's sort of more in the mainstream, or like at least being talked about more and more as a thing that people do and as a thing that is a skill builder, which it is, you know?
Yeah. Do you remember Cassandra Clare? She's like a
I never read her because I didn't read Harry Potter fan fiction before the books ended. I would read fan fiction for other things and just never tell anyone that I was up till 5 a.m. reading Sailor Moon or Inuyasha fan fiction. But so I never read her stuff, especially because I was such a canon shipper that I know her fanfic were
Draco
aggressively not.
Yeah, or Harry Draco.
Right. Yeah. So I never read her stuff, but I've obviously heard the drama.
Oh yes, the drama. It was like the
fandom
scandal
drama. Yeah. It's just like, wow. I think all the places in fandom that I lurked I was lurking, so I wasn't into like what was going on behind the scenes of it, but also I would just, again, I'm a Hufflepuff, so I clearly chose all the chill places to hang. I was just like, I'm just gonna be reading stories on fanfiction.net and not
Do you find that,
into all the other stuff.
I guess is it nerd culture? Do you think it's very inclusive? Because from how I see it, it's a pretty white place, and I didn't recognize that honestly until college or post college, because I always I was the same way. I lurked on like forums, like having shipping wars with whoever, and I didn't even recognize like some of the things you were talking about. Those are things like I didn't even talk, because I was just like, Harry and Hermione must be together. That's the end. Yeah. How do you feel now that it's basically you've made a career out of it, I would say.
Kind of. Hoping to make it like a lucrative one.
I feel you.
But it's like a side, thing that I do.
It's a passion, but with it not being very inclusive, how do you find yourself navigating that?
Yeah. I think, as you were saying, I didn't really always clock how white fandom spaces were, partially because I was just lurking and wasn't like into it. I wasn't like talking to people or making friends, but then also maybe that's why I wasn't making any friends, because I'm this black girl on the internet, and all these spaces are white and just very different from who I am as a person, even while sharing this love of whatever the thing was. But yeah, as I've gotten older and like come to social media and Twitter especially, I found lots of I've always had nerd friends, and I've always had nerd friends who were people of color, but I think there's still the friends that I had were still different than like they weren't part of nerd culture that I'm aware of. So growing up and just leaning into my nerdiness and like finding communities that are full of nerds of color, including the Nerds of Color, just a plug for Keith, hey, what's up? Finding spaces that are dedicated to that have made me become aware of how white fandom spaces is outside of that, and how it is the main thing. Things like there are Doctor Who conventions and Harry Potter conventions, and when you look at them and like the demographics of the people who are there, it is very, very white. And I think that's part of the reason why I was always lurking, because I never felt like I could actually go to that space, in terms of like making it a real life thing. A lot of my nerdery as growing up was either quietly with friends or kept to myself. And I don't know if having more representation for like nerds who looked like me would have made me more active in those spaces. But it is very weird, and it is a thing to navigate, where it's like there are landmines everywhere, because you start talking about Doctor Who. I follow this account. My friend Nicole has an account called Black TARDIS, so it's just like her blog from her Black perspective watching Doctor Who, and we've become friends via the podcast and stuff. And I think she tweeted something about someone was requesting information, like classic Who stories for Doctor Who, and she was like, which story, she tweeted out a thing of like, what stories do you like from classic Who? And she made a note and asked her some like ones that aren't sexist or racist, like just give me something that's good and not going to make me angry in terms of like, bad representation from back in the day. Like obviously we understand that like it was in the 60s and 70s. They weren't woke or whatever. I mean, they weren't woke last year either. So
there was like an Oriental episode.
Exactly. So it's like, don't recommend that one to me, is what she was asking. And someone was in her mentions like, like obviously you're gonna get it because it was how it was at the time. And she's like, okay, but you could still just request the ones around that one that are a little less. Like I understand it might be there, but don't give me the bad ones. Give me the less bad ones.
One, I think it's not problematic now that I think it's the one where like the Daleks first came, the origin story.
Sure.
And there's like a great monologue from the scarf one, the long scarf. Tom Baker?
I don't remember. I'm not good with my classic Who.
It's okay. And yeah, that's one of the few I've watched that is not problematic. So there's
so it's
that.
like it exists. It just don't. But he was like, the person who tweeted at her like it's just gonna exist, like was just like this back and forth that didn't didn't help the thing at all. So it's just like you're just a black fan on the internet who's just like, don't recommend something racist to me, and then someone's gonna be like going back and forth at you about like, how dare you? And it's just this weird.
I can't.
It's so weird. For the Harry Potter one, we do the thing Black Wizard History Month, so we had a Twitter chat one of the days in February, and we, the first question was like, I forget actually how it was worded. It was like, how do you find yourself in Harry Potter spaces or something? That wasn't how it was phrased. It was like, I don't remember how it was phrased. It doesn't quite matter. But for the most part, people on Twitter where the conversation was actually taking place was fine. We put the prompts also on the Facebook page, and one of the Harry Potter, big Harry Potter websites shared it. And so in that, it was fine. Like, wow, thanks for being inclusive, or like throwing us a share or whatever. But someone started commenting on the first picture. It was like, I remember when Harry Potter was allowed to be white or whatever, because the picture, the image that they used for the question had Black Hermione and a South Asian Harry, which is like a popular fan cast on Tumblr.
So cool.
A lot of people on Tumblr are like, what if Harry was South Asian though? And it's like, what if he was? Like, that would be great. Yeah. And Ron was still white in the picture, like.
Ron's the worst. But I hate Ron. Just like he should have died in canon.
Cold world.
I was like such an insane shipper. I was just like, he should have just died.
Hilarious. But it was like, I remember when Harry Potter was allowed to be white, and it was like, but he still could be for you, but what's the problem if someone views him as something else? Like, why does that hurt you? So it's just this weird thing of like, even the most innocuous of opinions or fan casts or just things that you share online, these white fans who are very dedicated to keeping the status quo and not giving up anything. And it's just like, you could just share a little bit. Like, we would also like to just go off and create our own things. But, you grow up in American society, you're conditioned and given all these things that star white people, and like there's not really very much promotion or inclusion of things that aren't that. So you're going to connect to it and find a way to enjoy that thing. So I should be allowed to have a piece of that pie too and create my own stuff. Like, I should just be able to do both, because y'all can do both at the same time.
Exactly.
So
there's space for everyone.
There's space for everyone, and it just is so baffling to me that people are just like, no, how dare you take this away? Or like, well, what if I made Black Panther white? Well, it's because the whole point is that we don't have a lot of representation. So I forget what's that. There's like this analogy, and I'm not going to remember how it goes, but it's something with M&Ms in a bowl or Skittles in a bowl or something like that, where it's just like, it's okay. The whole point is that there have been mostly white stories. So us adding more stories of color shouldn't be a problem. Like, we're not taking away your M&Ms. I don't remember how it goes.
Whenever you say M&M, I keep thinking about the rapper. And I'm like, yes.
I mean, that is part of it too, to be quite honest. But, it's like, we're not taking away your thing. Like, you will still be able to create stories starring white people just over there somewhere. Yeah. And maybe we could just shine the light on people of color just for a few hundred years. Because it's been like, millennia. But in America, 400 solid years of just white people having everything.
Exactly.
So it's like, do you not have enough?
Yeah,
I don't know.
And it's like so sad.
Aren't you bored of the tropes? Yeah. There's always the question of like, oh, this trope is dead. This trope is dead, and like no one's interested in talking about this kind of story anymore. It's like, actually, I would if it starred Black people. I would love that. I've seen plenty of white rom-coms. Give me the Black ones. Give me The Sun Is Also a Star, which stars Yara Shahidi, and I don't remember the actor's name, but he's Asian, and I'm like, yes. It's coming up soon, and I'm very excited for that. And, it's just like, we could tell, there have been plenty of rom-coms. They've mostly starred white people, so give me Sun Is Also a Star. Give me Crazy Rich Asians. Give me, like, more of this thing that I love with new people.
Thing I can, like, be like, yes,
right.
One rom-com.
Right. It's just like, you only have that one, and it's like, wow, suddenly Crazy Rich Asians does really well and, like, is a phenomenon, and everyone's talking about it, and suddenly you're tired of like, how white people you're not allowed to have rom-coms anymore. No, it's one rom-com that has come in. Or like, Black Panther, like all the other,
there's
all the other MCU
movies,
right? All the other MCU movies are starring white people, but suddenly the superhero genre is oversaturated and dead because Black Panther made $70 billion or however much it made. It's just like they get so.
And also, Green Book still won Oscars, and I'm just like, yikes!
And it's like a story about a black pianist, but it somehow is led by the white guy.
Yes,
Mahershala Ali won an Oscar for playing a character who is the subject of this movie. Viggo Mortensen's character drives him around, and it's about him having to go through this Southern tour, but somehow Mahershala Ali was the best supporting actor in this movie. At the very least, they were co-leads, like, or should have been. But and I did see the movie.
I haven't seen it.
Right, like they. I don't know. It's really annoying because the movie does frame Viggo Mortensen's character as the lead. We don't meet Mahershala Ali's character. We don't meet Dr. Shirley, the subject of this movie, for 20 minutes or like 15-20 minutes of the movie. It's just about his, Viggo Mortensen's Italian family and like the fact that he is racist against black people. He like literally throws out some glasses because black people touched it. And so then he like goes down to meet Dr. Shirley, and then they go on this tour. And first of all, why is the movie called Green Book when I saw it in the movie 3 times? It's like I don't. 3 times. One time where they explained what it was and that he would need to use it. The second time it was like in his hand while he's in the car. The third time it was like on a bed at one of the hotels. Like, I didn't see it very often in the movie.
Yeah.
And so at the very least, this should have been a more equal text where it's like, if this is a movie about their friendship, and that's what the trailers were saying, it shouldn't have been, this is about the white guy meeting the black guy. It should have been more like, this is them being equal, meet Dr. Shirley meets Tony Lip at the beginning of the movie with more parody, and then maybe I would understand. But like, we really made a movie about racism where Viggo learns to not be racist against this one person. We do not see him interact with other black people. So I actually came out of the movie like, so he's not racist to Dr. Shirley.
Yeah, it's his one best
one black friend.
Best friend who's black.
And it's like, I don't know that he was never racist to it. Like, I don't know that he actually learned to not be racist, as the movie seems to imply that he learned through the power of friendship to not be racist. I don't know that he learned that because they literally do not show him interact with any other black people. And like, first of all, that's not how that works to begin with. But also, even if it was, you didn't show your work that he was actually friends with other black people. He was just friend with one person. Oh, at the end, though, he told his Italian family not to call him an eggplant, though. So like, that was really important.
Oh, Jesus.
Apparently.
It's like worse than I thought.
Yeah. And like, I enjoyed the movie in and of itself. like, And I have to say that because I tweeted about it after I saw it. Like, that wasn't terrible, but I did immediately understand that in the out of context, it's not Best Picture worthy, but it's a movie that like has laughter and sadness, and you're like, oh no, what's gonna happen next? Like, it is a very play by the numbers. Like, it does its job as a movie. Yeah. It is not the best movie. I would have never.
It's not Oscar worthy.
It's not Oscar worthy, but like, I laughed.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, or like, ha ha ha, But at the end of the day, I couldn't watch it without its larger context in the scope of Crash and The Help and all these movies where it's the same narrative over and over again. It's reverse driving Miss Daisy. So it's the same narrative over and over again. So I was like, first of all, there's that. And then everything that's happened since the movie came out was just equally, like, it just made
all
it
the
worse.
Interviews.
Yeah, all the interviews. And like, listen, my favorite movies are the Lord of the Rings movies. Mm-hmm. So Viggo Mortensen, I realized that I don't actually watch anything of his outside of that, but I love Aragorn. King Aragorn, okay?
Yeah, of course.
King Aragorn now has no actor. He just is he's a character that just exists out of this. He's sprung out of Zeus's head like Athena. Because Vigo out here saying the N-word during a press junket when he didn't need to. I understand the context, but even within that context, you don't say the word.
It's like
his context was literally like, we don't say the N-word anymore while saying it. What?
Don't say it. Don't say it. Oh my God.
It's just this baffling thing. So I'm like, well, now Viggo Mortensen doesn't exist, and Aragorn is just somehow this fictional character just exists, and he just walked onto set by himself with no acting behind it.
If only.
And I wish sad that we have to do that for so many. And that's another thing in terms of like being a fan who's a nerd and a nerd of color, because, you know, any of these people could say something reckless and wild at any point. So it's like, I want to love this thing that is, you know, for the most part, a lot of times stars white people, but, you know, the creator behind it might say something terrible, and that's a thing that you have to reckon with and grapple with and kind of be on edge about at all times.
Yes,
it's like at any moment, these people might be like, this is bad, and you're like, no, that's not bad. Inclusion is terrible. What?
Well, speaking of inclusion, maybe this will go into our segue with the topic you brought today, which is also about magic.
Yes,
I believe
it is about magic. So I'm going to talk about my second favorite magical Potter after Harry Potter. So that is the
yes,
I thought about that. I was like, yes, that's a segue.
That is our segue, because there were magicians of color back in the day.
Yeah.
We had an episode about a Chinese magician.
Right. And I was like, oh, I know what I could do. I know what I could talk about, a thing that I've been thinking a lot about. So one of my favorite movies is The Prestige. So there's this,
we also talked about
the Chris Nolan movie. And when I was listening to that episode, I think neither of you liked it, right?
I didn't like it. And I also, after recording that, I have a memory of getting into a fight with my fellow nerd friend because she loved it. And I remember I was just like, I don't like it. I didn't get it. I was like in high school. I was like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
And she got really mad at me. And I was like, now I just remembered this fight I had with my friend because I didn't like it.
Right. And I can get that. But I do enjoy a mystery and a twist, you know, and Chris Nolan's great for that. So, you know, I'm watching this movie and I'm like, this is great. Love the aesthetics. Love the time period. This is really cool. And then afterwards, I'm like, they're all white though. And, you know, this whole thing of like, you know, watching this thing and wanting to enjoy it and connect with it and being like, I could really connect with it if they included any people of color in this movie. Even one would have been great. So I was thinking a lot about that. And so I was doing some Googling at some point, I'm sure, you know, a Wikipedia rabbit hole one night. And I was like, oh, there were Black stage magicians who did this. So one of the ones that I'll try to succinctly talk about today was actually the first stage magician who was American born, who was popular here, was Black.
Amazing.
Because a lot of stage magic and like that phenomenon was very European. It was a thing that they did across the sea. And I think a lot of people who came to America were born overseas. And so that, you know, this guy who I'm going to talk about was the first one to be born here and become kind of famous for being a stage magician. So yeah, Richard Potter, who was born in 1783.
His last name is actually Potter.
His name is Potter. No, it was not. It was the true segue.
Wow.
So I bought this book called Conjure Times, Black Magicians in America by Jim Haskins and Kathleen Benson. And it has a bunch of, just through history, the most famous Black magicians that we know about. So Richard Potter is one of them. And yeah, it's just like this cool book that has a lot of great stories about it. And I don't know how factual all of these stories are. So some of these may be legends.
Really?
You just like the way that they're told, you know, like I don't think we know every single detail about these. Obviously, Black historical figures didn't get a lot of coverage, didn't get a lot of factual, you know, written down like histories and stuff. So I think some of these things are like, we heard once that this happened. So yeah, and I didn't write this out as a story at all, so we'll see how this goes.
No worries. It's the power of editing.
You know, can't wait for that magic to be born. So Richard Potter, he was an American magician. He was Black, and I think his father may have been white, but this is one of those things that we're not really clear about. But I think he was, as they called him, mulatto.
This term comes up a lot on my podcast, and I had to ask. I was just like, I don't think it's nice, right? You should not say that.
I think it was just the categorical term for it, but let me just leave it at that. Literally, he was a Black magician just because, no matter how much, especially back in that day, no matter how much white you had in you, if they even knew about a little bit, you were Black. But I think he was half Black and half white. So he was born in Massachusetts, and I know that at some point in his life, he was a cabin boy for on a ship, and so they went over to Europe, and then he landed in England and was just like, I don't think this is for me. So then he just stayed there, and at some point he meets a magician named, I think they were brothers, and he worked with James first and then later on John. So the Ranney brothers, they were magicians who were traveling, I think, from Scotland, all around Europe, and so he started working with one of them and was just like an assistant in their show. So he would that's how he learned magic. I think one of the things he did was one of Ranney's tricks was to switch out a chicken, like cut off a chicken's head and then make it appear like reattach the head. So it was, I know, it was, and even in the Prestige, it's like this animals were harmed during the making of the show, of these magic shows. So they would cut off the head of the chicken, and Potter's job would be to switch it out so that the live chicken would show up. It's like, yikes. Oh, yeah. PETA would be mad.
Yes. PETA would be so pissed.
Yeah. So, he traveled around with Ranney, who was like a magician and also a ventriloquist. So he picked up some of those tricks, and he had a 20+ year career. So he worked with the Ranneys a lot. At some point they came to the United States, and so he would travel with them. And because Ranney was white, he was just seen as his servant. So he didn't really have a lot of issue with racism and dealing with that. I think it says that at one point he did try to host an event. I think in Philly it said he did try to host an event for Black audiences, and this is in the North. This is somewhere in the 1800s, I think 1801. So slavery's still a thing, but I think not happening in the North like it was in the South. So he tried to have an event, a magic show for Black audiences, and the owner of the theater was like, no, so he canceled the event. That was really? You can't? I guess because they just wanted Black folks to come, and he put an ad in the paper. So he was performing for mostly white audiences. And then, so he started working with James first, I think, and then John. And then at one point, I think he did do a solo show before he left them. Just the one. And then he was just like, okay, I'll give this a try later. But Ranney went back to Scotland or Europe or wherever at some point. So he was like, you can do it. Go off on your own and be a magician. So he did, and he was pretty successful. And that's, part of the thing. It's he was the most successful, one of the first really successful stage magicians. And he was a Black guy, which is really cool. At one point, it was saying that for the most part, he didn't encounter much racism. I guess he traveled a lot in the North, where he kind of knew where to go and how to play it. But he did try to go to Alabama once, and legend has it that
I'm shaking my head no.
I know. It's just don't go to Mobile, Alabama. At one point, the legend says that they performed at an inn, and I think they were supposed to be allowed to sleep there, which is a rarity. They just did not, again, Green Book, weren't allowed to stay at these white establishments. And I think they were going to let him and his wife stay there, but everyone got so mad about it that they had to sleep in the barn. And so I think it said in the book, it says that he was going to that there was more stops on the tour, but they had to go in the opposite direction because they were scared.
I would be scared
right,
too.
and so I think he was like, that's enough on the South for now. Let me just go back up north. So he lived. But it says that despite this issue, Potter still made over $4,000 from that event. So he still made money, but he couldn't sleep.
4,000 is like a lot for back in
that
the
day. Yeah. So again, but again, legend has it. So who knows if that's actually factually true? The journalist in me is just like, let me just clarify that I haven't triple checked this information, but I did get it from some on Wikipedia and some from this book. So, but he was, popular enough where he was able to like buy a house in New Hampshire. In 1814, he purchased about 175 acres in the village of Andover, New Hampshire, which is also at some point, that's where he had done that one solo show before the Rainies left. So he lived in New Hampshire, had a place called Potter Place that's up there.
So cute.
I know, right? And so he had it as farmland and would like hire out people to run the land while he and his wife, who was an assistant on a show, did their tours. I think they mostly were in Boston. Of human and reptile. Will pass a red-hot bar of iron over his tongue, draw it through his hands repeatedly, and afterwards bend it into various shapes with his naked feet, as a smith would on an anvil. He will also immerse his hands and feet in molten lead and pass his naked feet and arms over a large body of fire. He will also perform a variety of pleasing magical deceptions, which to give a minute detail of would fill a volume. The performer, not being willing to anticipate the pleasure the audience may receive from his performance, flatters himself that he is so well known in different parts of this country as to not require the aid of a pompous advertisement. In addition to his magical and ventriloquial talents, he will introduce a number of songs and recitations. So it was just like, doing magic, singing a few songs, reading some stuff. I don't know what he was reading. Some of the other tricks that he performed were frying eggs in a beaver hat, thrusting a sword down his throat and drawing out yards of multicolored ribbons, then spitting out sparks and flames, appearing to swallow molten lead, using a special mixture of lead, bismuth, and block tin. He would pour the mixture into his mouth and then spit out pieces of hardened lead. Asking a member of the audience to touch the lead, he would smile when the spectator attested that it was indeed too hot to touch. Potter also put peeping chickens in women's pockets and rabbits and bumblebees in men's hats. Some said he was the best American ventriloquist and magician of his time.
Wow.
Early 1800s, this black magician working mostly in Boston, which, is not, of the northern cities, is not known for being the least racist.
I'm very surprised. Even now when I've gone to Boston, I went to Boston like a few years ago for the first time, and I was like, I don't really like it here.
Yeah, it's not, I think of the northern cities, it's one of the most obviously talked about as being racist. So it's really fascinating. He got married at some point, had 3 kids. Actually, one of his kids died really tragically. He was crushed under a wagon. I guess on the farm that they also owned. He would, host events at the house and stuff. He died in 1835. His wife died a year after that. His son very briefly continued his act as Little Potter.
This is so
which he did for I think a few years before it says he disappeared. They don't really have records of him after 1840. So for 5 or 6 years after his father died, he continued his act. Mm-hmm. So apparently a lot of people thought that regular Potter, Richard Potter, was, because he was mixed, they weren't sure where he was from, so they were like, maybe he's South Asian. Maybe they were like, oh, he's Hindu. Or they thought he was from the West Indies. And because he had this foreigner vibe about it, I think that's why it was a little better and easier for him to navigate, the racism at the time.
Did he play up that?
I think he might have, just a little bit. I know that some magicians who came after him who were black definitely played into the foreigner. Some of them wore turbans. Yeah. Just I'm gonna just pretend that I am from the East. Just
from the Orient, guys.
Right, yes, from the Orient. Similar to word to mulatto, where it's we cannot, let's just not bring that into 2019. So yeah, I think he still I think his place is still up there and marked as such, up in Andover.
So you can actually go see his
I think so.
farm, or at least the land.
I think so. Again, unclear. The book wasn't really specific about it. So yeah, there are a few after him that are pretty cool. In brief, there was one who was there's this black magician named Henry Box Brown. So he was born into slavery in Virginia and escaped to freedom at the age of 33 by arranging to have himself mailed in a wooden crate in 1849 to abolitionists in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
That's amazing.
Right. So and I don't know if it's clear how he eventually just became a magician.
I did one trick.
Right. He did this big magic trick where he escaped slavery.
That's a huge trick.
Beat that Houdini.
Exactly.
Where he escaped slavery. And then at some point he started touring the country as a magician and entertainer until at least 1889. And then I think at one point he went to Canada. There's this other guy named Black Herman who was a stage magician. He was the most prominent African-American magician of his time. He learned, I think, again, from European style stage magicians. He worked in like Harlem and stuff. And yeah, it's just really cool to think about Black people performers, especially with like vaudeville and like the history of blackface and, you know, the ways in which Black people were excluded from the performing arts, and how there is a very small niche of performers who are Black who made their way into this very specific art form of, you know, sleight of hand and ventriloquism. Yes.
Right? I don't know.
I think so.
I can barely pronounce most things.
I know.
This podcast.
Listen, my mouth is very dry.
Oh yes, you
but
have your wine.
Right. But Black Herman did a buried alive act.
Oh no.
Where he would pretend to be buried alive. I think it says his act began with his internment in an outdoor area called Black Herman's Private Graveyard, and continued 3 days later with his exhumation, revival, and a walk to the stage venue where he would perform the rest of his show. So he'd show up and be like, I died.
Like Jesus. Like
right,
days,
and then,
right?
Right, exactly. He even published a book called, they think he published this book, called Secrets of Magic, Mystery, and Ledger. I want to never say this word right. Legerdemain. Which is like the act of sleight of hand.
Oh, okay.
So it's just like this really long word that I actually don't know how to pronounce because I've only read it.
It's okay. I recently just learned how to pronounce, oh my God, Saoirse, right? Saoirse Ronan?
Ah. Is that how you say it? Okay.
I have not been saying her name out loud. I'm just like the Ladybird actress.
That sounds right.
Because I'm like...
Saoirse?
Saoirse, I think. I don't know. Actually, maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong.
I can't trust it because I think anytime I've heard it, they've probably saying it wrong.
That's true.
So I don't know. But yeah, this guy would like go to different towns and pretend to die. And I think at one point he like had a heart attack on stage.
Oh, no.
And they buried him and no one believed that he had died. Per the wiki, it says Black Herman died in Louisville, Kentucky in April of 1934 after collapsing on stage, presumably the result of a heart attack. Due to the fame of his buried alive act, many people in the audience refused to believe he was really dead, and thus it came about that his assistant, Washington Reeves, charged admission to view Rucker's corpse in the funeral home, bringing a dramatic close to a life spent in showmanship. He was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, here in New York.
Oh my God.
So I just love the idea of, at some point, I hope to like do more digging, and it's something I'm super fascinated with. It's just like the idea of these Black stage magicians. So it's like I have this book, and a lot of the books that are about this topic, like the book that I bought, Conjure Times, is not in print anymore. So I had to buy like an old library copy off of Amazon. Mm-hmm. I think Black Herman's book, it may be available in some rare, small, print, not like actual, just like from whenever it was published. So I want to find that. There are some records there's like this family of stage magicians named the Armstrongs. I found some of their like advertisements and stuff from like the South Carolina library system. Like they have them on view on their website. So I would love to just like continue investigating this like very specific and niche topic, because there aren't very many like resources that are open and available to the public about it. A lot of it's like stuff you can find at the library under reference only, so you can't take it out, or it's not really available online, or like no one's really sure if this happened or what happened. So it's a really cool topic, you know, for someone who loves magic and a magic series with the last name Potter. And it's just like, wow, the first like stage magic guy was also named Potter, and he was black.
Yes, there you go, really white cool. Harry Potter fans.
There you go. There you go.
I asked you this when we were talking on the phone. Did you ever find if this was the origin of the black man stereotype?
I didn't. Yeah, there's that trope of the magical Negro who's always like, in all these movies, the white character needs sage advice and knows this black character. I feel like, which of the movies? Shawshank is very like...
Oh, I was thinking Green Mile.
Green Mile, that's the one. Yes, Green Mile is the one I'm thinking of, where it's literally he just has these mysterious magical powers.
Yes, he does.
And, you know, for the benefit of the white characters, or probably The Legend of Bagger Vance, which I haven't seen that. But I know that it's like Will Smith is like Bagger Vance, I think. And it's just like this guy who goes around giving advice to people. When we were talking about that Key and Peele sketch.
Yes.
Where they have the magical Negro going around, and it's like two of them giving
it's like two janitors coming to a lawyer's office and being like, I'm the
I know. One. I don't think they're related, though. I think the idea of stage magic is so removed from the idea of actual spiritualism that I don't think that that's where that comes from. I don't know where that comes from. I should look it up. But I don't think they're connected, especially because a lot of these black stage magicians, when they would perform for black audiences, would go around, they would be performing in schools and churches. And I think if they were a little suspicious of it being too real, I don't think they would have allowed that in those black churches.
Yes.
On that circuit. But yeah, I think they're so removed. But it is fascinating that both things were popular at the same time, like stage magic and spiritualism were like both
voodoo
and stuff like that. Those are all happening in like the 18th and 19th and early 20th centuries as like this fad that's like going around, you know, like people were having seances. And I think in the book Potter at his house would like make jokes about like the spirits coming, and like he would like try to scare people a little bit, not in like a serious way, but it's just like this thing that is happening at the same time in America, but also very heavily in Europe. But they're so different, but have the same terminology a lot. It's just like magic and like black magic and stuff like that. So it's fascinating that it's all happening at the same time, but they're very different.
Yeah, because when I think about black magic, I guess I would think about New Orleans and like, what is her name? But the voodoo
Marie
queen.
Laveau.
Yes. How you
could have said that wrong, but yeah,
how you can like visit her gravesite, and there's like a whole like tourist thing where I actually did get my palm read there. Ooh. I was supposed to like die by now or something.
Oh, no.
It was this guy. He was just like, you're gonna be really sick and you're gonna go to the hospital. And I was like, what do you mean? And I got really scared.
And I think that's also part of it too, of like there are people who are using who are pretending to be spiritualist or like magical, but using the tricks of sleight of hand and the tricks of stage magic in order to make people believe. But for the most part, stage magicians don't want you to believe that they have magic. They're just doing these tricks and don't want you to know the secret of it. So they want you to be shocked and awed, but they don't necessarily want you to think that they have magical powers.
Yeah.
But there are people who are spiritualists who I think use those same techniques to trick people into believing that they have some sort of spiritual power to like call ghosts or have seances. And it's like all those movies where it's just like, oh, I pressed the button and, you know, everything started shaking and everyone believes that I have these powers. So yeah, it's just weird. But also there's the idea of like black is like a negative term. So like you were like black magic and then voodoo in terms of just it being a thing. But black magic in, I guess, white culture is very much like the dark bad magic, where it's like you're doing evil things, and then white magic is like good and, you know, happy wizards and happy witches and stuff, where it's and just the complexity of Black being both a term for this race of people, but also all the negative connotations that go with it. And then that means that Black has negativity for the culture as a whole, but voodoo has good parts to it, you know, like, but for the most part, people kind of are like scared of it.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because it's Black, both in race and in the magical system, I guess. I don't know. It's, people are.
Yeah, there's
lack
racism
nuance.
Exists everywhere.
Literally everywhere, and people lack nuance.
Yeah. I never even thought of that until you started saying that. Like, yeah, voodoo is associated with something very negative. I think when I went, it was for me, I was like spectating. I was just like, oh my God, I get my palm read. I'm always really fascinated with psychics and stuff, even though I don't believe it, I don't think.
Right.
Except when he did tell me I was going to die. I was just like, oh my God.
Well, now you can now not believe it because he was clearly off the mark, but hopefully he wasn't just wrong. Yeah.
Oh, I hope not.
It's like, oh, I got the year wrong. Sorry.
Do you consider yourself very spiritual or believe in a...
Yeah, I grew up super Christian, so I do believe in God and a very non-denominational, but probably closer to like, I don't know, Baptist or Pentecostal, because I think that's what my grandmother was in terms of what she grew up with and like the churches that we went to. So there is like the idea of seances or like, and I'm still trying to navigate the idea of like non-Western expressions of religion, because I know that voodoo is kind of looked down upon in Black Christian culture and its connection, the way that but I think they are connected in a way that typical Black Christian culture doesn't want to accept. Like, I think they come from similar sources. They're just using different terminology and kind of using different ways of expression. But I'm still navigating that difference and trying to figure that out. Not to say that I know anything about voodoo at all or like I'm looking into it, but since we were just talking about it in terms of like
and magic
and stuff and the different kinds of spiritualism, but I know that I don't mess with Ouija boards. That kind of seance ghost thing. I just, in order to keep it safe, I just keep that over there.
Yes.
Or on the TV and in movies, and I don't mess with it in real life, really, because I'm just like, just in case, I don't want to be messing with something that I'm not supposed to be messing with, because the Lord said don't do it. And I'm just going, you do what you want to do over there. I'm not going to, yell at you or like be weird about, but I'm going to just be over here away from
Was
that.
there any like, I guess, conflict with your family when you were really into Harry Potter, because there was like the whole talk of like,
literally
this is
everyone's
witchcraft.
just like, Harry Potter's of the devil and it's witchcraft. And I'm like, first of all, there's so many other stories that we talk about and tell, like The Wizard of Oz. Or like, I don't know, just like there are witches everywhere in culture. But no, in terms of my family, not at all. My grandmother kind of was just like, I'm glad you're reading. Don't care. I trust you to be reading good things. Like, I guess you just didn't care. And I think that if anyone did come at me about it, it's just like, it's a white woman from Europe writing about magic, but like a lot of the themes in here, there are literally Bible verses in this book. In Deathly Hallows, I think and I still don't understand why magical people would have a Bible verse on their gravestone, but I think both Lily and James, or maybe one of them, on their tombstone, it is a Bible verse.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I never made that connection.
I don't remember which one though. I kind of want to look it up.
Yeah.
So it's like, Harry dies and is resurrected. Like, this is just all a Jesus metaphor. Like, you could just relax. Like everyone just calm down, because it's not
like the magician that would bury himself and then he actually died.
Right. And then
poor guy. That's just so sad that no one believes you're dead.
I know. I feel like that happened to a lot of stage magicians.
Yeah, I could imagine.
And the last enemy to be destroyed is death, which comes from 1 Corinthians 15:26, which I think was on Lily's gravestone. So I'm just curious as to how that works. or maybe I guess they had a joint gravestone. But I'm just curious as to how that works in the magical world, where I don't know that, like, they celebrate they have the Easter holidays and they celebrate Christmas, but I don't think there's ever really an explanation or a any kind of sense of whether or not they believe in anything.
Yeah.
Like in terms of a higher power, whether God / Jesus, since they're celebrating Christian holidays very specifically, or not. Like Joe just didn't bother.
Like, whatever.
She's like, they'll celebrate Christmas. Who cares? Because she doesn't even take from the places that Christmas and Easter come from, which are pagan like there are pagan traditions in both of those holidays.
Yeah.
In terms of like early Christians wanting to mask however that works, of turn, the common story is they wanted to mask that they were celebrating, God by incorporating things from these pagan holidays that were coming around them, which is why the tree exists. And I think that's how we got an Easter bunny. I don't know. But Joe didn't even take those elements and make them into anything. So it's just really interesting that she has them celebrate these holidays with no reference to why.
Yeah.
Like, why do wizards celebrate Christmas?
Exactly. Take that. Like, I had a friend who broke up with me because she was super Christian and I was super into Harry Potter. And she was like, you're going to go to hell.
What?
Like, literally in 6th grade. She had this intervention. She was just like, it's witchcraft. She went to one of those, like, mega churches.
Yeah. I know,
like,
but it's also, like, not... If it were a book that were teaching spells or, like, had real spells, I could maybe understand it and I probably wouldn't have picked it up. But literally, they're just speaking Latin.
Yeah.
Just like
it's, like,
Catholics people do, like it just doesn't. It was never a thing where, I think it was mostly just because people trusted me to know what I was doing and to not be into anything that was super weird. But it also just doesn't make sense as a criticism, just because you can learn good things from Harry Potter and things that they're teaching you in the same spaces, evil is bad, good people are good, and like just
and there's
it's
bravery,
not glorifying
friendship.
anything bad except for the people who have dark mark tattoos, and that's just on them.
Well, as we're running out of time, is there anything that you want listeners to take away from either the Black Magician story or in your work in Nerds of Color, or anything that you just want listeners to leave with? It doesn't even have to be deep. It could just be anything.
I don't know. Inclusion is great.
Yes, inclusion is great.
You can't just it's not just about diversity, it's about inclusion. So it's not about just like looking like you have lots of different types of people. It's also about making sure that they have equal say and equal representation in the stories that you're telling. So it's like Green Book is diverse, but it is not inclusive because they literally didn't go talk to his family. But then it said that he was told not to talk to his family, but then didn't know that they exist. It's a great example of diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
It's like, it looks diverse. Mahershala Ali winning an Oscar for this movie looks diverse. But when you actually are breaking it down, it is not very good in terms of representation or conclusion, because you got to go talk to the people that you're trying to represent with your diversity to make sure that they have an equal say in how they're being represented. And I think that's important in nerd culture. I think that's important in what this podcast is doing in terms of taking people's stories from history, but also making sure that the people's stories are being told by people from that background, and just making sure that, people are allowed to use their voice, because for the most part, there are so many white people who get to talk about whatever they want and with no, so why can't we do the same?
Exactly.
Like, why aren't we allowed to use our voice and share our stories ourselves?
Yes.
Ourselves.
I totally agree. Is there any thing you want to plug that you have coming up for you, or any of your social media handles where people can find you?
You can find me on Twitter and most places, but I'm mostly on Twitter at Constar24. You can read my Harry Potter fan fiction at blackgirlscrade.org. It's also on AO3, But
I love AO3.
It's so great. It's fun to, for the most part, read fan fiction, but never wrote any until the last couple of years. So the ones that I've written have, star all the Black characters in Harry Potter. Literally all of them, because I've made a Hogwarts, they start the Hogwarts BSU. So Blaise Zabini and Dean Thomas start the Hogwarts BSU at Hogwarts and invite, Lavender and Hermione and some original characters and Lee Jordan, and they all hang out. So me and my friend Bayana wrote a Kwanzaa series. So I took the principles of Kwanzaa, and they don't celebrate Kwanzaa, but each day of Kwanzaa, so there's 7 of them. I'm not going to remember them offhand, but Umoja, which is unity, so that's the first one, and they decide to create this group and be unified. And, Kuchitagilia and Kuumba and Imani, and so there are 7 principles of Kwanzaa. Each story takes the idea of whatever that principle is and applies it to the BSU. I also wrote a story starring Lee Jordan where he starts Potter Watch from book 7. So it's like him trying to reckon with needing a place in this resistance, which I wrote it probably somewhere in 2016, so it was very apt at the time in terms of people trying to figure out what their best method of resistance is in a time that's pretty fraught with bad things happening all around you, and how you can use your specific talent. So in the story, I kind of use that to get Lee to Potter Watch in terms of finding what he's good at and using it to fight the war in a way that's different than all the other people around him. So those are probably the 2 things that I like the most that I've done for that. But otherwise, everything else that I do can be found on Twitter.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait to read. I'm definitely going to read this.
Yay.
And I'm going to text you about it.
Yay, I'm very excited.
Go back to my fanfiction days.
As a person who lurked a lot, now that I've written some fanfiction, when people give comments, it's really exciting to get comments, especially from the people who are like, wow, I love that you're writing about what the Black characters were doing.
Yes.
I've always thought about that, or I'd never thought about that. And it's like, I hadn't either until recently.
Yeah.
So it's really fun to kind of break out of even my own whitewashed, it's a thing that I've noticed a lot in terms of children's media and talking about that and the way that we grow up and all the things that we're inundated with in stories and stuff, where it's a lot of Black people that I've spoken to or read about discuss the idea of viewing things from a white lens. And so, even when I would try to write original stories, they were white characters because it's what I was used to reading. So it's how I wrote, and how it's taken, the advent of social media and just people talking about this stuff more in the mainstream for me to get out of that. So it's a lot of the things that I'm into and a lot of the fic I was reading was all white people, but now it's now I can remember, okay, I'm gonna think about these Black characters, but part of it is that they're not written well or they're not given any attention. So it's I get why no one was writing, people write about Dean Thomas, but no one was really writing about Dean Thomas, and I wasn't looking for it because it wasn't promoted and he wasn't, a major character in the series. So it's
oh my gosh. Dying here. I'm good.
So yeah, it's just breaking out of my own whitewashed brain, I guess,
I totally
to make
agree.
sure I'm rewiring
yes,
it, yes,
or decolonizing our
the mind.
Yes,
exactly,
which is exactly what this podcast does.
Yes,
as well, because I've also came from a very European lens of history and art and culture. I was just I love art history, but it took me a while to realize that all the art that I loved was European art. Thank you.
This little windows, I didn't even notice.
John came through the window to give me water. I was dying.
Just peeked out, yeah.
But thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. This was a great discussion.
And this is Now in Color, the podcast where you can I can't even say what I'm saying. This is Now in Color. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and it's presented by Brick Studios. And thank you so much for joining me, Connie.
Yes, thank you for having me on this snowy Saturday.
Oh, thanks. And before we end, I'm going to do something with you. I'm going to ask you about Constance Gibbs. Welcome.
Hi.
Do you think about the underwear that you wear?
I try not to. Mostly just, I need to do laundry.
Yeah, I did not think about the underwear I wear either. This is getting way more awkward than I intended it to be, but I was like, I'll incorporate your underwear in the conversation somehow, but it never came up.
Of course not.
But this podcast is now being sponsored by Dillon Underwear, which is a panty made to empower women. Yes, Dillon is completely seamless and comfortable and is made to have you feel confident and sexy all day long. Made locally in New York by women for women. New styles are coming out this April. Sign up for the newsletter at DillonUnderwear.com and make sure to follow Dillon Underwear at Dillon_underwear for live updates.
Ooh.
Yeah, so now this podcast is being sponsored by an underwear company, which is great. Because I never thought about apparently the underwear you wear affects your entire
And I think
health.
Sometimes, it's best when you're not thinking about it because it means it's comfortable. It means it's working and functional.
Exactly.
I'm sure Dillon is that.
Dillon is that. Yeah, so check it out, guys. I'm going to get a promo code when they go on sale soon. She said she'll give me a promo code, so
excellent.
Stay tuned, guys. I'm gonna cut this somewhere.
Obviously, just chop it up. Just chop it up. It's fine. I mean, just plop it in the middle, and now for a break.
Yes, now we're going on a break.
And now we're back. And now we're back to Now in Color.
Yes. Thank you for those sound bites.
I got you.
Yes. So, I guess that's it.
Yay! We did it.
We did it.
Magic. And I didn't use the word black girl magic not once because I love the phrase, but also it's just a little overplayed.
Yeah.
Only a little.
A lot. Yeah. I understand.
Yeah.